Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're continuing the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and I have the last part of the three-part Taki Udon review today, because we did the first part, the build and overall hardware guide, and then we did the comparison between console cores on the Terasic-made DE10 Nano board and the Taki Udon Mr. Pi clone. But you guys wanted to see some arcade comparisons, so this is going to be the final side-by-side set of MiSTer FPGA comparisons on the Taki Udon clones. We'll go through some of my favorite arcade games, kind of compare and contrast the results and talk about it from there. But so far, the Mr. Pi Taki Udon's MiSTer FPGA DE10 clone board has been absolutely 10 out of 10 spectacular, and I can't recommend the thing enough. I really didn't find much to talk about in the negative whatsoever. It's just been a great experience, so if you are wondering whether or not you should order one, definitely pick one up if you don't have a MiSTer FPGA yet. And just so you know, like the previous tests, all of the tests will be done across the same micro SD card with the same installation on the same cores with the same game files, so everything is kept as par. So let's move right into the first test here, Capcom CPS-1 with the final fight. And just so you know, when you see Mr. Kun wearing aviator glasses, that's the Taki Udon board. When you just see Mr. Kun without his shades on, that's going to be the Terasic DE10 Nano. But there's so many amazing cores on MiSTer FPGA, and we want them to be one-to-one par with each other, because if you're going to pick a Taki Udon clone up, you want to know that you're getting the exact same performance, the exact same minimal latency, the exact same image, and the exact same cycle accuracy that you would get on a Terasic manufactured board. And now we're moving over to the Terasic side in and of itself, and in just a moment we're going to do another side-by-side test on the intro, because the introductory sequences where players don't have control are really good places to check screen transitions to make sure that everything is running on the same cycle. So as we go through the introductory sequence of Final Fight here, and we are playing the Japanese ROM across both, you are going to see that every single transition, every single text scroll, every single hard cut on screen is 100% frame locked. How I do this is I basically take the first time something happens, like a character in a line popping up on the screen, and I put the two clips in the timeline side by side them, so that way everything before and afterwards should be on the exact same frame. Now sometimes you will be one frame off based upon how the frame rate works, not being an even 60 frames per second, but in smaller sequences like this, that usually tends to not happen. And I will say, at least on Final Fight, for the entire introductory sequence, we have frame lock 1-to-1. Everything is identical. And now as we put them side by side, it basically looks like I'm just playing the same game twice. Of course, there's going to be slight variances because I am playing this two different times, and I don't really like using the same controller and feeding the same inputs in at the same time. I do like there to be some variances so you can see how things end up happening. But as far as Final Fight is concerned, between the Mr. Pi and the Terasic DE10 Nano, there's absolutely no difference whatsoever I can observe. So here is your test, and there's going to be a lot of them during this video. This is Final Fight, and it's on one of the two boards. You leave me a comment down below, and you tell me if you think this is the Mr. Pi or the Terasic DE10 Nano. And every single game I show you is going to have the same test, so you're going to be answering a lot of test questions. Let's see if anyone can actually get a 100% result. But let's move over to a different game on Capcom CPS-2, Street Fighter Alpha 3. Now I'm not going to show you the same rounds, I'm just going to show you the same characters, so you can take a look at the color of their clothing and their overall appearance on the screen, because trying to get the same stage twice on a fighting game across two different playthroughs can be a little bit of a pain. But we're here on the Terasic DE10 Nano, and of course, this core from Hotego and his team is a 10 out of 10, so much so I actually sold my original CPS-2 multi because I never took it out of the closet after this core was pretty much finished. And I do know, at least in some tournament circles, they will use MiSTer FPGA to compete, so you know you're getting an accurate time. Now we're moving over to Taki Udon's clone here, and just take a look at the screen motion, the heads-up display, Chun-Li's outfit here. See if you can again spot any differences whatsoever in the image, because this is another test, at least in the gameplay department. I have not been able to tell them apart if I wasn't looking at the file names and if I didn't actually play the games directly before recording this. And I don't leave this footage sitting around, I capture it and I edit it all in the same day, so I remember exactly what it was I was doing and what I was playing, because honestly, if I waited 48 hours and tried to come back in, I would probably forget which source was which if I didn't have the naming conventions on the files to protect me and keep me accurate in these tests. Now moving side by side again on Street Fighter Alpha 3, the intro, we have another situation in which the frames are absolutely 100% locked. Every single hard cut, every single transition, every single thing you're going to see on my screen is 100% the same. Now do be aware YouTube compression sometimes gets a little weird and it'll throw an artifact in one image that it doesn't in the other. There's absolutely nothing I can do about that. It happens. It's just kind of how the platform works. So here is your second test again. This is either the Taki Udon MiSTer Pi or it's the MiSTer FPGA made by Terasic. And again, I don't think anyone's going to be able to 100% get this correct unless you win a bunch of different coin flips in a row, because that is how incredibly close they are on the arcade side of things. And there's definitely at least one test here that there's going to be a visual clue on the screen in the score that you're going to be able to tell by, but this is not one of them. Let's move back over to Neo Geo. It is on the arcade side of things just because it is Metal Slug 3 and you can play MVS, and I'm going to give you a sound sample. First I'm going to give you Taki Udon's clone board, and then I'm going to give you the Terasic DE10 Nano. Listen to the sound sample, see if you hear any difference, and leave me a comment down below, but here they come. Now, as I always say, I am not an audiophile, and my ear's a bit tin. I'm definitely way more in the visual department working as a filmmaker for pretty much my entire career, but to my ear, those are one-to-one identical again. Now let's go to the side-by-side just so you can take a look at that golden hour sunset, all of the sprite work on the screen. Because in the previous video, somebody said that they thought the colors on the MiSTer Pi were slightly more saturated than we were getting on MiSTer FPGA. Now, I have color-calibrated screens for editing. I went into DaVinci Resolve and looked at the color scopes, and these are just basically identical again. Now, of course, depending on what's on screen at once, you can have a slight variation in the color scopes, but if I look at and sample different individual colors on the screen, I am getting the same values back. So at least when I watch this, they look 100% identical, but the only thing I can speak to is my panel that I have calibrated. Depending on if you're watching on your phone, on your television, on your iPad, you're going to get a different looking color than I get, and that's just down to the color science and accuracy on your individual screen. But as far as the gameplay, again, absolutely no differences. And here comes test 3, and I absolutely love this level in Metal Slug. This is either the MiSTer Pi or it's an original Terasic DE10 Nano, so again, you need to guess down below. But as far as the slowdown in this game is concerned, it slows down at the exact same spots in the exact same instances that it would across both boards. And that is because the Metal Slug games are always notorious for having slowdown on Neo Geo, and I did not use any of the turbo cores for this. I'm only using stock. If you want to see a turbo test, leave me a comment down below. Maybe you can convince me into doing a part 4 of this review, but honestly I kind of feel like this is maybe the last thing I have to say on the clones because they are just doing so incredibly well. But watch the blood spray here on that vomit bomb, watch all of the graphics, watch everything else, and you tell me if you can actually determine what it is you are looking at, whether it's that clone board or it's the Terasic original. And that is always a good test result when I tell you that I don't think anyone's going to be able to accurately guess. I'm sure somebody will notice some stray pixel here that might identify something or other, but for the most part, again, if you want to play something like Neo Geo on MiSTer FPGA, the MiSTer Pi is 100% going to give you the same experience as something like the actual Terasic board. Now let's do something like Dodonpachi side by side. In this instance, we have the Terasic board on the left and the Taki Udon on the right because it is a tate or vertical game. And I will slightly try to vary up the gameplay styles, even though for the most part, this first level is something that is ingrained into my memory, but I did try to play slightly differently. And just so you know, if you notice slowdown in different spots, this game can and will slow down at its own will depending on what's on the screen at a moment in time. So if you see differences in slowdown here, that is to be expected. But what this test really is a test of is the ability to play something like a bullet hell shmup exactly the way that I would normally play it if I was playing an arcade board or the Terasic DE10, and I do use an arcade stick for all of these. So we're just basically trying to see how well I can perform across both screens here, and you'll see, at least up until this point in time, my score is near to identical, my performance is near to identical. I'm basically having near to the exact same gameplay across both screens, and that's what really does matter. And if you take a look at the score in the top left hand corner and top right hand corner, you'll see that I'm playing a little bit better, but that doesn't make any difference. The tabulation of the score is really not important to this test. And you'll see here, because the boss is basically on a global timer, it's going to appear at the exact same point in time across both boards after like a minute of gameplay. The only variable here is going to be how quickly I can beat the boss, and you will see I do unfortunately take a death on one of my playthroughs. But that was my fault. I wasn't paying attention. Honestly, I was trying to scratch my chin in between a pattern, and that was just a stupid thing to do. But otherwise, as far as the performance, my ability to play an extremely difficult bullet hell shmup from Cave, I can do the exact same thing across both platforms, and if you have the same result on something that is so fast twitch action like Dodonpachi, then you know you're good to go no matter what board you choose. And actually, it was the Terasic side that I ended up dying on. I thought it was the Taki Udon side, so maybe that's even a better result. Honestly, that is a joke. It is within the variable of chance, but that's your comparison as far as response time is concerned. Now let's move over to something like Mega Man: The Power Battle on Capcom CPS-1, a very colorful and very charming game. First, we're going to start off with the Taki clone, and then we're going to move over to the Terasic, and then I'm going to give you your second sound sample of the video, because this game has amazing music, so I want you to hear it and see. But pay attention to the colors, pay attention to the sprites, and as we move from one image to the other, again, it's almost indetectable if there is any difference. But here's that second sound sample. You're going to get the Taki Udon MiSTer Pie first, you're going to get the Terasic DE10 second. Listen and hear if you hear any differences. Again, they sound identical to me, and outside of the sound effects, which are going to be variables, if I put both waveforms in an audio monitor in DaVinci Resolve, they're at the exact same volume, they're peaking in the exact same places, the waveforms match if you put them over top one another. Now that to me is a very scientific test to tell you that the audio is coming across exactly the same, because if I can put the waveforms on top of one another and I can't see any variables outside of the sound effects, that means I'm getting the exact same audio at the exact same volume, because those two waveforms basically merge into one. But this is your next test right here. Is this a Terasic DE10 Nano, or is this the Taki Udon MiSTer Pie? Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, because again, I feel like this one's going to be the hardest test I've ever given you guys. Now if we take a look at something like The Simpsons that just recently-ish came out from Hotego and his team, another absolutely classic arcade game, and it has a lot of intro in it as well, then we can try to do that frame lock and see whether or not everything is happening at the exact same time in the exact same manner. And that's basically what we mean when we talk about cycle accuracy, the amount of cycles it takes for anything within the game to actually happen. And if we have a core that operates the same way twice because it's the same code on the same SD card on the same game, then we should see the exact same thing happen in the intro across both boards if they're doing exactly the same thing functionality. That's why I always use these as tests, and you guys love to see them. Let's go ahead and take a look at the intro here to The Simpsons, and again, if there's any differences here, I cannot detect them. I went through frame by frame and all of the transitions, made sure everything moved exactly at the same cadence, and every single hard cut, every single scene transition, every single eye movement of all of the characters in their little character bios there happened at the exact same time. Even when Lisa tilts her head back here, it is to the exact same frame on a 60 frame per second timeline. Technically it's 59 with some rounding, but that is just how video works. So the Taki Udon MiSTer Pie, just like the Terasic DE10 on something like Hotego Simpsons Core, is doing fundamentally the exact same thing. And when Homer and Bart fly in there and touch the ground, it's on the exact same frame. So you'll see here, we're going to take a look first at the Terasic DE10 Nano board on the boss fight. I'll then move into the Taki Udon clone, and you'll get your next test in the video. But the main takeaway, at least so far in this video, is if I did not actually put the logos at the bottom left hand side of the screen, whether it's the Terasic or the MiSTer Pi, I do not think anyone would ever be able to tell. And that means when you sit down and actually play these things, you don't need to think about whether or not they're doing anything differently, because in all of my tests, they've basically done the exact same thing outside of a 4-frame difference in one of the intros to Crash Bandicoot 3. That is literally the only thing I could detect, and I'm even not sure still why that is happening, but it is one of those situations. This is going to be an excellent result no matter which version you play, but definitely I can't recommend enough. The price on this is quite good, obviously, for the MiSTer Pi. And here you go, this is either the MiSTer Pi or the Terasic DE10 Nano, so pay very close attention to the colors, to the heads-up display, to the gameplay, to anything you think would be helpful when it comes to actually identifying the two. This is one of the situations though where there is actually a clue within the imagery. It's not that there's anything different between the two, but if you just paid attention to the previous capture, I did leave a clue in this one just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a lifeline on all of the guessing, because otherwise I really do think I'm asking the impossible of pretty much everyone. But let's check one more game out as far as the direct comparisons are concerned. We're going to move back to the Capcom CPS2 with Pro Gear, one of my favorite bullet hell shmups that is not a Tate shmup of all time. If I didn't hit your favorite arcade game in this video, I apologize. I kind of picked what I really am familiar with so I can get a good feel of it, but you can pretty much take my word for it. You're going to get the same results no matter what arcade core you test, it seems. So we have MiSTer FPGA with the Terasic board on the left, and we have the Taki Udon clone on the right, and this is going to be your last sound sample for the video as well. We're going to start off with the Terasic DE10 Nano, and then you're going to hear it fade into the MiSTer Pi. So keep your ears really tuned, see if you can hear any difference, and I'll be right back with more gameplay. If there's any difference whatsoever in the audio, I cannot tell by my ear, and as far as the gameplay is concerned, it's identical as well. And I do try to play these games slightly differently, but because I do have muscle memory for pretty much all the bullet hell shmups I play, you will notice I end up basically on the exact same spot in the screen at the exact same time. So I tried to do a couple circles with the plane in different spots just to give you some visual differences as far as the capture. And as far as the boss coming up at slightly different timing, that's something you can actually influence within the game and how far you are to the right of the screen and where you move, so that is not a difference there whatsoever. And outside of taking a stupid death because I've looked away again on the Terasic side, I'm playing Pro Gear exactly how I want to play it. I'm able to control it. Everything in the latency department is identical because, again, same capture card, same SD card, same core, same game file. The only difference is the MiSTer Pi clone Terasic DE10 or an authentic DE10. And if I can't tell the difference playing one of the games that I've played a metric crap ton of, I don't think anyone else is going to be able to tell the difference as well. So much so, this is your last and final comparison that you need to guess on in the video. This is either the MiSTer Pi or it's the Terasic DE10 Nano. Leave me a comment and tell me down below which one you think it is. And I know there's a ton of other arcade games I could have tested for this comparison, but this is probably the last time I'm going to do a direct head-to-head arcade video because I found absolutely zero differences between the MiSTer Pi and the Terasic DE10 Nano in the entirety of this testing. And of course there's hundreds upon hundreds of arcade cores, so is it possible that there is some slight difference in one of them? It is an outside straight chance that that is true, but if you have to hunt that much and still not find something, then maybe that means it is just completely one-to-one, and you can be totally happy purchasing a Terasic DE10 Nano or a MiSTer Pi if you can get a hold of one. And that is always good news for the community. It helps it grow, it helps it get bigger, and you get to have the exact same experience across the board. So again, comment down below, is this MiSTer Pi or Terasic DE10 Nano? And that is part 3 and hopefully the final part of this review series, unless you guys want to see something very specific and it seems interesting to me to make a video on, because across all of my testing, both for videos just playing around with the MiSTer Pi, this is just a MiSTer FPGA that you can put next to your television and treat like you're playing an authentic triple stack with that Terasic DE10 Nano in the middle, because basically everything is 100% identical. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you have any special requests for maybe a part 4, if you can hook me in and it seems interesting enough, maybe I will do it, no promises. But short of that, when the next batch of the Mr. Pies come up, if you don't have a Mr. FPGA yet and you want to buy one, you're 100% good to go all day long and twice on Sunday with the Mr. Pie. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.